Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I'm Ryan, and today I'll be talking about AHAB'S Rolling Sea, A Natural History of Moby-Dick by Richard J. King. I love this book. I will tell you right now, I gave it 5 stars. This is nonfiction, and it is everything that I wanted it to be. What does that mean? If you've been here for the last 7 months, and you saw my review of Sounding by Hank Searles, you'll know that I've kind of gone down this path of reading a lot about whales and whaling. Obviously, the pinnacle of whaling literature is Moby-Dick. And I've done a review on Moby-Dick. I have an entire playlist about Moby-Dick. The review that I'm doing right now will be in that playlist. But when I was reading Sounding, I came away wanting to know more. And I eventually read some nonfiction books about whales, about the socialization of whales, specifically about sperm whales. But I also had so many questions about Sounding that I reached out to some people in the scientific community, specifically Hal Whitehead and Luke Rendell. And I had questions about what I had read in Sounding. This is not the first time I've done something like this. When I read The Purple Land That England Lost, I wanted to see where things were taking place. So I bought a map of Uruguay, and I used Post-it notes to map out where the character had been. Even when I'm reading fiction, I want to know how the past has informed it. And when I read Moby Dick, I realized that there was a lot of factual stuff in there. It's surprisingly accurate. Moby Dick was written in 1851. It was published in 1851. It was written the year before that. It is so well done. It draws on Herman Melville's life at sea, and a lot of the literature that he had read, a lot of the research that he had done, really made Moby Dick complete. But it's old. And what has changed? What's true? What's not true? What was made up by Herman Melville just to make a interesting story, and what wasn't? And I don't remember how I found out about this book. But this does for Moby Dick everything I wanted to have done for a number of books I've read in the past. Everything that I wanted from Moby Dick is in this book. It's amazing. I won this book through a bet with my dad. My dad said that their dog, Bindi, would wag her tail as he approached her. I said, I bet not, and I'll bet you a book, because I'm on a buying freeze, so I can't get books. But I bet him a book, and I won, and this is what I asked for. And it took me a week or two to read it, but it is amazing, and it was worth it, and I took my time with it. So what is it? It is a natural history, obviously, of Moby Dick. That's on the cover. But what this book is it talks about what's going on in the United States, around the world, when this book's being written. It really follows the path that the Pequod took during the book. So each chapter has a little chart at the top of it, and it has a little bit of a track line from where the Pequod was, and it basically tells you what's going on at that time. But it's going into what was known in the 1800s about whales, about ocean life, and what is known now. It goes into what was happening around the United States. It talks about what was going on in Herman Melville's life. And it's fun because it really does go with the story. It touches on the symbolism in Moby Dick, the representation. But it also talks about what was right and what was wrong in the book. It talks about the way, and I didn't realize this when I read it, but basically Herman Melville paired up chapters by something that was scientific, where our narrator Ishmael is putting on his scientific hat and describing something that he's apparently done research on. And then the next chapter in the pairing is the story that is related to that, with the Pequod's voyage and AHAB'S search for Moby Dick. I think this is a must read for anybody who has read Moby Dick. And I would recommend reading Moby Dick first. You should definitely read Moby Dick first. I would recommend reading Nathaniel Philbrick's Why Read Moby-Dick. It's a short, very short read. But soon after finishing reading Moby-Dick, read AHAB'S Rolling Sea. It will talk about everything that was happening around that time. It will go into what St. Elmo's Fire is. It will talk about different seabirds and different wildlife and what whales were and were not capable of, what society thought about whales, how it felt about the treatment of animals. And I think there's a very important, relevant discussion about the threat to whales, about the threat to ocean life, and what we're seeing now. And it's hard. I think it's hard to appreciate the threat that we face when you're not that interested. It's very easy to say, yeah, we could lose North Atlantic right whales, but who cares? Or you may say, we could lose North Atlantic right whales, but I can't do anything about it. That's very easy to do. And most of us do that. Richard King even talks about the fact that most of us are Ishmaels. Most of us know that something's wrong. We know that something should be done, but we don't do it. We watch. We record. We talk about it, but we don't do stuff. We don't take an extra step. I think what we're seeing now with the decline of species, with the lack of growth, especially with certain whales, and with what seems to be a coming collapse of a lot of ecosystems, I think there's a lot to be worried about. And I think we really get used to acknowledging that there's going to be a problem, acknowledging that there's something scary that's going to happen, but not really internalizing that could happen. If there's a complete collapse of ecosystems in the ocean, it will impact us. The average temperature of the ocean, how these animals and plants and life won't evolve fast enough to adapt to the rapid changes. And it's speeding up. And it's very easy. I was reading this at lunch, and I went out to get lunch. And when I was reading the final chapter, the very end of the book, I thought, we need to do stuff. We need to make some changes. And while I was reading it, I took a bag of potato chips, Sun Chips, and I put it in a Subway bag to throw away. And a bottle of Diet Coke. All plastic. All stuff that's not going to decompose. And I threw it away. And that plastic could end up in the ocean. It could end up as something that looks very tasty to a sea turtle or to a whale. And I've done this how many times? And how many of me have been multiplied doing this every day, or in many parts of the world? So I think Richard does a great job of presenting that very real risk that I think is quickly approaching. We get very used to being human-centric in our thinking. We've been on Earth for a very short time, and there are many species that die off. And one of the things that Richard talks about is, some of the messaging in Moby-Dick was that even when humans are gone, the sea will still be there. If we exceed the capacity for the ocean to absorb what we're doing, not only will other species die, but humans could die. And there's no reset button there for humans. There's no do-overs. You get to a point where everything's set in motion. You see this kind of with whales. If a right whale, let's say a North Atlantic right whale, reproduces with one calf, possibly one calf, once every 3 to 5 or 3 to 8 years, and they're having less calves, you can't sustain the population. If there are 300 or 500 North Atlantic right whales left in the entire world, the North Atlantic, and half of those are female, let's say, I'm not sure what the breakdown would be, and they're having a new calf that will not necessarily live once every 5 years. That's not a path to sustainability for a species. There's some pretty tough stuff in this book about what we need to think about, and really, I don't know. I don't know if we're past the point of no return, and that's hard to think about as a dad. And will your kids or your kids' kids or your kids' kids have to deal with this stuff? They will. And you feel like you've left them a shitty deal. So there is a lot to think about when you finish AHAB'S Rolling Sea. And I think it's important stuff to think about. But I'll also tell you that in addition to those important discussions that we need to have, this is an amazing review and deep dive into Moby-Dick. So this is what I want to challenge you to do. Read Moby-Dick. Read the actual book, the unabridged Moby-Dick. Don't listen to it. I think you do lose a little bit. Read it. Take your time reading it. And then once you've read it, read AHAB'S Rolling Sea. And then really reflect on what the book has meant, how it was ahead of its time, and what it continues to mean. Because Moby-Dick is a very important book. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of my favorite reviews I've done. It was a major surprise for me after I read it that I liked it so much and really what was in there. But I have to say, like, after you read it, you start to forget. And I'm going to have to read it again at some point. But this book was so great in going with the flow of Moby-Dick, but going much more in depth. And I loved it. Richard King, I sent him a message. He replied. He lives in Mystic. I've done a video about kind of my trip back to my undergraduate program for my class reunion. And I spent some time in New England doing whaling related stuff, not whaling, but going to a few museums and an aquarium. A number of those stops were in Mystic, Connecticut, which is where Richard lives. So he was responsive. I'm hoping exchanging some more emails with him now that I've finished and have some more thoughts. And nice guy. And I think this is really well researched. It's really well written. It's funny. It's engaging. It's complete. It hits on so many things that you'd like to know. Scientific, historic, societal questions. It hits on the Civil War, on slavery, on industrialization, the economy, the science of whales, evolution. It hits on so many different interesting things. And so much of this not only was included in Moby-Dick, but many things that Herman Melville touched on in Moby-Dick were surprisingly accurate, considering the time and the limitations that the scientific community had. I think you'll find that Moby-Dick is well ahead of its time, and if you read AHAB'S Rolling Sea, you'll get an appreciation for how ahead of its time it was, and how much information is contained in that great American classic. So, please read Moby-Dick, and then check out AHAB'S Rolling Sea. You don't have to read Moby-Dick to like this, but I think this adds so much to Moby-Dick that this should be required reading. Moby-Dick should be required reading, but this should be the next stop for somebody who's read Moby-Dick. And that's it. Thanks. Bye.